doing this with me, Amanda. So,
Thank you for having me.
actually, I think since we last spoke, I sold a company to a public company as CEO and just decided after that that I'm one of very few African American women in tech who've been,
Yeah.
just taking that. And I think there are like six of us who've raised venture, had
But there's
exits.
six now? That's
I
amazing.
know, right? You're like, who are they? But I decided that I was going to launch a company called the Growth Warrior that would help women and diverse founders learn the whole process of fundraising and scaling
Mm,
tech companies.
mhm, mhm.
And so this podcast has kind of come out of that, and we've released eight of them, and everyone's like, do more and go longer.
Oh, I
And
love
so
that.
that's what I know. So what I would love to do today is you're talking to several thousand entrepreneurs who are women and people of color or diverse.
Right.
And what I want to do is just kind of like catch me up, like walk me through the history. And then I want to talk about your most sort of challenging time and how you navigated that as a mother and as a woman and female leader.
Yeah. I'm listening. Let me plug in my laptop to make sure it doesn't go
No
crazy.
problem.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Challenging. Yeah, I don't. Oh, yeah, I've got challenging time. Yeah, yeah, we got lots of challenging times. Though full disclosure, CoderPad, my current company, I'm not a founder, and the investors
Okay.
brought me in. Um,
I've done that before.
and that was my last one too, that ended up shutting down. That was like an incredibly funny, weird, not funny, haha experience. And yeah, we can talk about all of it. But if you want to know about
So,
like pitching and venture, like, I haven't,
I mean,
I've
definitely, I want
participated,
to
but
hear.
I haven't been like the only one standing there being like, please, please, please write me a check.
So, let's actually start there.
Great.
So, in 2015, I was brought into a company that had existed kind of like what you've done the last two times and brought in by the investors to replace the CEO. So, just we'll talk about the past later.
Mhm.
But what was that process like of getting selected, getting recruited, and then why did you say yes to CoderPad?
Well, let's do the first one. So the first one was a company named Rabbit,
Yeah.
and that process was a great lesson for me. So, very transparently, I'd been at Hotel Tonight. I had been there for years. Loved. I mean, I literally like, yeah, I like bled Hotel Tonight purple. Like I could tell you the dimensions of the H bed logo. I loved that company,
Yes.
but it was definitely about to go through a change, and I personally was like looking for like more responsibility and a bigger role. Like I wanted to get out of my function and kind of go wide. And I knew I wanted to lead a company eventually. So I felt like I just needed a wider aperture of the business. And so I interviewed for a number of roles, a number of COO roles, got to really final rounds, was getting the offer together, whatever, went out to drinks with or beers with the CEO. Thought like, wow, this is a done deal. He'd like committed to me. We were like going to talk. We were literally like the meeting on a Friday afternoon over beers was like figuring out like what to do with the team I was going to inherit, who to keep, who to get rid of, like what he thought the right play should be. And it was like 5:30, 6 o'clock. I was like, hey, this has been a ton of fun. It's been 3 hours. I gotta go. I gotta go meet my nanny. 6 o'clock on Friday. Doesn't seem unreasonable. And he was like, what do you mean? You have children? And I was like, yeah, I've got children. And I was like, well, one. And he was like, oh. He's like, are you gonna have more? And I said, well, to be honest with you, like I believe like our relationship has to be a foundation of trust and honesty. So I'm actually pregnant right now. And like the blood drained from his face. And he was like, but you're having a
Whoa.
beer. And I was like, yeah, I'm having a beer. Like, that's true. And then he was like, well, how's that going to work? How can you do this job? And then slow pedal, the board delay. And then all of a sudden, single white man with 5 less years experience shows up and is the perfect guy for the job and gets the job. And my offer letter never came through. So I was stewing over that, and I got a call from a recruiter who was like, "Hey, I heard you in the process for that." He's like, "Why'd you want that job? That was a terrible job for you." And I was like, "Well, these 3 reasons. I want to be a CEO." And he was like, "Well, why don't you just go get a CEO job?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. Why don't I go get a CEO job?" He's like, "I'll get you a CEO job." And within, no joke, a week, I had 3 CEO interviews. So
Pause. Amanda, what? Okay, so first of all, being a mother in tech, that must have been sort of infuriating. Like, you must have been super
oh, I'm
disappointed.
still bitter about it. This was 3 years ago, and I'm still talking about it. And heaven help that little man if he ever needs my help, because whatever.
But it's interesting. I mean, it says a lot about the culture of that company and possibly that board. So
And
when
it
you
says a lot about the
reflect,
culture of the city, frankly, but moving on.
but do you think that's changing? Do you feel like tech in Silicon Valley is becoming more amenable to the fact that women have kids and we do so at various different times, and our families are our number one responsibilities and our passions? So do you feel like that's evolving for you, or have you seen it evolve in the Valley?
I don't think so. A, I think there's still a concern that you can't be fully dedicated to a company if you
Yeah.
somehow your uterus has created a human life. And I'm not entirely sure how the two are correlated, but somehow people think that's the case. I mean, even when I took my current job, someone said to me, "How are you going to be CEO? You have 2 kids." I was like, uh-huh.
It happens. It
What?
happens.
Like, yes, both of those are true. And if I had 3 kids, I could probably be CEO too. Guess what? So yeah, I don't, I mean, look, I'd love to tell us all it's getting better, but I think that's like a full lie. I think there are more evolved companies. I actually think the past year has helped everyone
Yes.
realize that you can be a parent and still have a job and do really well at that job and be totally dedicated to that job.
Right.
Um, and still like be dedicated to your kids, right? Like you can work 10 hours a
Well,
day and,
and do so from the safety and comfort of home. So
right.
let's talk about that for a second. I mean, as a mom, I was pregnant during the pandemic. So there weren't a lot of planes, trains, and automobiles. I was raising money. I bought a company, and I could do a lot of it like this. And which is why I have like nice lighting back there, Amanda. So I don't know if you can tell, but
Oh
I
yeah, it
love
looks really good. Yeah, I've got total lighting envy, and I'm also realizing I need to like Botox this line. But
it. But it was great because I could be at home and I could be safe, and so there was a lot of comfort in that. But CEO of Bumble, right? She was pregnant, has a young kid. Do you feel like the women who are kind of blazing the trail are going to, along with the pandemic and how things have changed around work, do you feel like those two will collide and create more opportunities for women leaders and CEOs?
I hope so. I think everything gets better. Katrina Lake was actually the first one when oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of that company that she runs.
Yes, it was a communities company, and it's
Yeah, anyway, that's the shopping company that my mom loves. Anyway, Katrina Lake stood up there and rang the bell with her then I think 2 or 3-year-old. Like every time that happens, like those moments are important. They're
Stitch
important.
Fix.
Stitch Fix, thank you. They're important. My kids also ate my brain. This is actually why some of the reasons why moms shouldn't be CEOs. I'm just kidding. This is why I think those moments are important, not for women to see. Like it's certainly helpful for like a 25-year-old to see that like, wow, you can be 35 and have a baby and ring the bell of a NASDAQ as your public company goes public.
Yes.
But I think it's more important actually for investors to see.
Yeah.
Um,
Say more about that.
I mean, look, most of the investors are men, no surprise. Most of the investors, if they have children or have a spouse, oftentimes the spouse doesn't work, or, they don't come from a world where they're used to seeing a mom work. And I do think the best investors that I've worked with and who the investors where this is never a question are the ones who have working spouses and like who are frankly sometimes more successful than they are. They've gone out and their wives have founded big companies and are like big deal. And I think that helps you. I think it helps investors see more clearly for the deal. And I think just continuing to hold that up as an example, as a reality, as not a weird thing. I remember, I stood on stage at the Women in Product Conference, 9.5 months pregnant, and gave that presentation. 2 weeks later, I had a baby boy. And then 6 weeks after that, I was at the Andreessen Horowitz CEO Summit, and I brought my son. I didn't tell anybody. I mean, I didn't ask. I just showed up. I was breastfeeding. There wasn't a choice. Like, he was 6 weeks old. And I carried him through that whole summit. And the single men were horrified and afraid and uncertain of what to say to me. But every parent and every woman in that room made a point of coming up to me and saying, I'm really thankful for doing this. Because it just sets a tone.
It's so bold, Amanda. And,
but promise, it's not bold. It's what bold. You have to do.
Well, it's funny. I just got back from, gosh, this is so vulnerable to talk about. This is not me, but like you forced the issue. So I've got a 2.5-month-old who's the cutest baby on the planet, second to yours, obviously. And I went to a business trip to Santa Barbara yesterday, and literally in the past, made it a 3 or 4 day trip. I did it in 24 hours, right? Like in and out. And I had, a bag with my pumping supplies and a cooler. Mm-hmm. And the women were like, oh, immediately saw me, knew what it was, and like, can I refrigerate that for you? And so I think there's a growing consciousness when there's more people like you out there, showing up differently. But I want to go to how you got to this decision to be a CEO, because you were massively successful at Hotel Tonight. You were there the entire ride, and incredible product. I use it today almost exclusively, right? Go Airbnb. But going from being a successful VP of products, C-level product and data executive, to being a CEO, you take on much more of, you're going to get rejected now. You have a board that you're reporting to, how you spend your time, your stress levels, compensation, everything changes. Like, what was the pivot point between being an executive to being the executive? Like, what happened for you?
The things I increasingly grew frustrated about in my product roles or my functional roles were the like cross-functional things, right? Like, why can't we get on the same page as, marketing, engineering, finance, whoever the bad guy of the day is, or girl, why can't, or like systemic things, right? Like, it's not in the culture to do that, or we don't do it that way here. And I'd be like, why not? Like, those were the problems I started to just get really frustrated with. And I really wanted my chance at doing it. And, I was talking with actually a friend, former Hotel Tonight colleague, and dear friend of mine earlier today. And he was like, God, I can't believe you love being in that seat. And I really do. Look, my day, as you know, is filled with nothing but problems. All the easy questions get answered before they get to me. Like, I get nothing but angry customers, bad contract terms, lawyers, no offense to lawyer friends. My day is not like rah, and all the good stuff is happening at the team level, but I just love having my hand in a little bit of everything and trying to create the system and the culture that enables people to do better. It's kind of an HR thing, I guess. I don't know. It's weird.
Culture is huge, and that's owned by the CEO. So 2 questions for you. One is, what does the funding for this company look like, and how did it get there? So give me some of the stats on the company.
Yeah, so CoderPad's an unusual one, and Vincent Wu, who's our founder, has like blogged and done podcasts and stuff on this. So you can Google all that and find the skinny. But he basically bootstrapped the whole company, grew it for 5 years, had several hundred customers, millions of dollars in revenue, and a couple of employees, and realized all the things he had to do next he didn't want to do, and so he sold it to growth equity fund, who said, all right, we'll take on this challenge. I helped them with diligence and making sure the tech was good and the company was good and the customers loved it. And then when the day came, they're like, we want you to run it. And so it's this beautiful combination of like product market fit, clearly validated, hundreds, thousands of customers, real customers who pay real money, and the chance to grow the team because it really hadn't been invested in. There was no marketing, there was no finance, there was no product, there was no sales, there was no customer support. Like all the things needed to be built. And so, and then my investor is obviously the growth equity fund who acquired the company and has funded it and continues to support and fundraise. And they've been fantastic. Their model's different from venture, and we're business partners together. And like, this is kind of an oversimplification that they're the money and I'm the brawn, but it's a little bit of kind of how it gets done. And together we're a brain, and it's great.
Interesting. Together we're a brain. So the concept of growth equity being different than venture makes a ton of sense. So on the venture side, it's all about, rapid scale, right? Growth at all costs to some degree. And then growth equity is, for the people who are listening and watching, it's obviously more around profitability, sustainability, and what I would call like the unit economics of the business. So when you think about when you've been in startup companies that are young versus where you are now, like how is your plate different? Like what do you care about that's different now than what it was before?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the most tangible example I can give is, one of the things we have to figure out for CoderPad and are always working to figure out for CoderPad is like how we can grow our new customer base. And when everything before I came into the role was all word of mouth,
Yeah.
direct type SEO, right? Like we hired our first VP of marketing probably 6 months ago, and he showed up and he was like, well, the good news is 99% of our customers and our web traffic is all direct type and SEO and word of mouth. The problem is it's all word of mouth and we can't control that. Like I can't do more of that. So this has been our challenge. So as we put together our budget for 2021, we were like, hey, we're going to invest heavily in trying to figure out growth here and spend, some real money figuring it out. And I was prepared for the venture capital question, which was, if you spent twice as much, how much faster could you grow? And what I got was the growth equity question, which was, if you spent nothing, what would the growth rate be? And do you think that's a good use of that money? And it was like, I was like gasping in the meeting. I was like, I'm so confused. And, way back in the dark days, I actually spent some time in investing on Wall Street. And I was like, oh, that's right. People do care about business fundamentals and making a profit and growing within your means and like not bloating the team for the sake of bloating the team. And the profile is just very different. It's very fun.
It's funny because you said a couple things in there that really resonate, and I've heard you allude to in the past, which is, you've had you're walking into a company that has customers that are working for it. And then you've got a product, but you obviously want to continue to tune the product, go to market, customer. So when you first got in and you took this role, how did you look at the customer base as a framework or a template for how you're going to build out marketing, sales, and product? Like what did that group of customers tell you about the future?
Yeah, what I think is so interesting about our customer base and what we've been doing, is product-led growth before product-led growth was a thing, but it's all been about, give people a chance to try the product and buy self-serve. I mean, my largest customer will cross into a 7-figure deal this year, which is very exciting.
Congratulations.
And every single customer I have started on a self-serve credit card plan with an individual at a company who wanted to give it a try. And I think that's just a really different way of going to market. And I think it's one of the reasons why the investors thought I was a good fit for the role, because it is all about the product. It is all about product and adoption. And the more you use CoderPad, the more you interview, the more money we make. But if you don't need us, like we don't make any money. Like there's no sales, or like, the old sales of like number of seats and like I sell you and then I'll call you in 11 months when I want more money. And like, it just doesn't work that way. And so I think one of the things that was surprising about the customer base as I went through it was just that product-led piece. And it's like so exciting and refreshing to see. I mean, it's got its own challenges for sure. It takes longer to grow accounts and things like that, but it can be done, which is
So
very cool.
there's a really big tie to customer success, I imagine,
Yeah.
right? So getting that customer. It's funny when you were, I think you were at Snag Jobs, and I was the CRO of a company called the Resumator, which became Jazz HR. Do you remember
Mhm.
that? And we had so a CRO. I was obviously obsessed with that funnel, and so
Yeah.
we had product led conversion, and so we could get a customer and convert them for like $13. It was amazing, right? But the expansion part of that was something that required a lot of intense focus on customer success. So, kind of quickly, when I talk to entrepreneurs, I talk a lot about net retention and how you have to be thinking about churn and all these things go into product strategy. So, like, how do you do that today, right? How do you
Yeah.
think about this is how we get customers, this is how we convert customer success, and how that influences where you focus the product team?
Yeah, with the big asterisk of we're always learning, iterating, and trying to figure it out. Like
Yeah.
today, it is all about how can I get as we have really good trial flow. How do I get those
Okay.
trials to just commit with a credit card? Just become a customer. Just try us a little bit.
Yes.
Believe enough in the trial that you're willing to put $50 a month on this to see if it works for you. And you're probably a mid-level engineer at some software company somewhere. And then what we need to do is then grow you over time through getting other teammates to join your account, getting you to interview more, helping giving you more ways to interview. And then as I like obsess about it, so I think about that funnel, right? How many new accounts are we
Yes.
getting a month? I think about what does expansion look like? And then what are the big levers we have for expansion? I think one of them is like proactive outreach, customer success. I think the other one we have to figure out is kind of layering another product line, right? Like if you look at the companies that have like the incredible net dollar retention, and I'm thinking of like the snowflakes of the world, that is because
Amen.
you buy one product and they're like, oh yeah, how about this module? And how about this module? And how about this module? Right. And so you need to have a portfolio of products or features that you can drive into that base. It's just not, it won't grow sufficiently. It will grow, but it won't grow as fast if it's just one product and usage of just that one product.
So let me summarize because it's really interesting to meet product executives who become CEOs. So I was a go to market executive who became a CEO, right? And so we obviously come at it from different perspectives. So
Yeah.
let me just summarize what you said. I mean, one, net retention's key. And the only way you get that is to be intentional. Who's my ideal customer? And it sounds like you really refined that. Second, driving adoption and value of the existing first product experience. And
Yeah.
then third is lowering the bar for that first trial, either through price or through, social proof. So really lowering the bar so that people go, why not? Let me swipe.
Yeah.
So talk about expansion. So let's say that I'm using CoderPad, I'm doing a ton of interviews, blah, 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 blah. How do you get me to go to the next level without it being around number of seats or other things that no one cares about? How do you start to pull out from your customer base where the expansion opportunities are?
Yeah. So if you're an individual or even a small team that's using us, I mean, assuming you're like our ideal customer profile, like you have more interviews that you're doing that are not being done by CoderPad, right? So then you can play with
Interesting.
consistency of process, right? Like, do you
Yes.
really want like one dev team using one set of tools and one process and another dev team using another set of tools? Like if you're an HR person, like inconsistency of both candidate experience and legal risk is huge. So that's
Got
like
it.
one way. So you got to work your way into understanding recruiting and how they feel about that. And then more often than not, it's how it gets sold. So here's the great story of how it gets sold. So at Hotel Tonight, we were customers, and as I was, doing my diligence on the company and working with the investors, I called up the head of mobile development for Hotel Tonight, and I was like, how did this happen? And he was like, well, the truth is, I interviewed at Facebook at the same time I was interviewing for Hotel Tonight. I didn't get the job at Facebook, but Facebook uses this really cool tool called CoderPad. So I thought it was cool. And then when I got to Hotel Tonight, they're like, great, congratulations on your job. You now have to go hire more people. So go interview. And I was like, well, crap, why don't we use CoderPad? That's what Facebook does. So he started using it. And then as his peers would watch him interview, and they're like, hey, what is that? That looks so much easier than what I'm doing. He was like, try CoderPad. And it kind of just grows upon itself. And then you have teams adopt teams and you get some leaders bought in. And as long as we can continue to prove value to our developers all day long, save them time, save them, make their job easier. No one likes to interview. No one likes to interview the interviewer or the interviewee. So just making that like an easier process and a faster process for everybody will win all day long.
So what advice would you give a young founder around how to do this well?
So I think you've got to have a great product, right? You've got to have a great product that you can very clearly articulate like what you're doing better or how you're helping them. Are you saving time? Are you saving money? What is it? What is in it for them? I am not a go-to-market executive, but I have been flexing my sales muscle. And one of my best mentors who leads sales says, if you're explaining, you've already lost. And I thought that was a great quote. I think it's a sales quote. And so I would pass it on to like new founders, right? If you're explaining to your customer, your investors, your prospective investors, you've already lost. Like it has to just be no duh obvious. So make it no duh obvious. Get them in, let them see it. They have to like get it super fast, and the rest will kind of work itself out.
So love that. Are you fundraising right now?
We are not. No. So I have this growth equity fund that these partners who are fantastic. And I'm not going to lie. Like we're also like doing very well as a company. And so I don't think they want anyone else in on the deal. But they are incredibly supportive in terms of the capital they have and the checks they can write. And we're actually profitable. So we don't even need to raise money. And if we raise money, it's all for like strategic moves. So it's like, it's a luxurious place to be.
So can you talk about how much has been raised?
I can't disclose all those details because it's a combination of what we acquired the company for and what we invested in the business. Yeah.
So tell me about your board meetings. Like, just give me like 2 minutes. Like what are you presenting? What numbers? Like, what's on your dashboard that you and your board really care about?
Yeah. So I do a monthly update to the entire board, generally related to our MRR, and so it's like, here was this number we said we were going to hit, here's what we hit. And then it, works backwards to what were the drivers? Was it more new? Was it more expansion? How was net dollar retention? And it's generally a 1.5 page update with like three big charts in the middle. So maybe 200 words. I do way better at math than English. So like eloquent emails are not my jam. So I send that out every month, and then we have quarterly board meetings. And because of that, and because I talk to the investors all the time, and they make it a point to talk to me to be available, and I make it a point to talk to them and ask them questions. Because we really are business partners in this. Our board meetings are, they've taken a format that is long conversations about the hard parts of the business.
Interesting.
And so there's not a lot of like glam showboating, things are good, because I've already sent that. Oh, I also do a write-up before every board meeting about like what's on my mind. And it kind of like sets the tone, but also it's my chance to call out all the good stuff and write down the good stuff so they don't forget, but also, kind of surface some of the bad stuff. So we don't have to get into the meeting and be like, this is so great. And then we did this, and this was the feature release. Like they know all that stuff. So then the meetings are about the hard stuff. Like, how do we acquire new customers? Like, if we do think strategically about growing net dollar retention, what could that be? How has customer success worked? Like how much investment should we have in customer success given our base? It's very much like a working session.
I love this.
I love this too, but it's taken me 7 or 8 meetings to get there, to be honest with you. The first meeting, I thought I was going to present them and they were just going to listen to me for 2.5 hours. And after the meeting, they were like, that was really good, but we have no idea what's actually going on because you just told us the good stuff. Please tell us the bad stuff. And so it's taken time.
It's taken time. Well, it's profound. In the last company I ran, it was a turnaround. And my personality was, let me show you slides of all the crazy, incredible stuff that we're doing. And the board hated it.
Yeah.
They hated it. And so what we had a whiteboard policy, which is it's a working meeting. So we're going to whiteboard, we're going to talk about strategy. So let me just summarize what I heard you say. I mean, so first of all, no surprises, obviously, to your board. So you keep them updated so that there are no surprises. And I love the monthly overview. But the what's on my mind kind of recap or pre-cap is interesting. What are some of the bullet points in that? Is it like things I want to discuss with you guys when we're together? Is it, things that I'm concerned about, things I'm excited about, highlights? Like, what do you make sure that they know before you go into the meeting besides the numbers?
Yeah, it's kind of a recap of our quarterly plan. So it's kind of like, okay. So our next board meeting, so the quarter ends end of March. And so, kind of have numbers and everything figured out by like mid-April, and I'll start writing it. And then I think our board meeting is like the first week of May-ish. And so I just sit down and I'm like, here's what we did well in the quarter that we thought we would do well in. Here's what we did well that we didn't think we would do well in. And here's what sucked and what we're trying to figure out. And I used to have the team write it, to be honest with you, because it was a good chance for team accountability and to have everybody say, this was my plan, this is what I did, this is what happened, this is what didn't happen. But I found that it was, getting to be too lengthy. It was like 16 pages. I was like, that's too much effort. And like, it was low ROI because, so what I do now is I write it and then I have the team edit it. And so it kind of manages the volume, but also puts everybody not on notice. Like that sounds like a very terrible way to parent, but kind of lets everybody know like, hey, this is what I'm gonna tell the board. This is my perspective. Where am I wrong? What other things would you kind of add to this? But makes it transparent so that you walk into the meeting and everybody already knows what our ROI was on ad spend. And like, they already know like how our trial conversion has gone. They already know like what our net dollar expansion was and how many customers we have above this dollar mark. And it's kind of already in there, if you will. And they come in with questions then because they've read something and they're like, they're like, hey, I saw one from this to this. What do you think's driving that? Like, have you considered looking at this? Or, I saw you did, last time it was, I sent analysis ROAS, so return on ad spend, like how performance marketing was doing. And they were like, this is not how we look at this. You need to look at this at a cohort level and watch it drain. And I was like, oh, yes, that's exactly how I should do it. So now my my monthly updates include that little snapshot of like, hey, this is how we're analyzing our performance marketing. And it like made me smarter. It gave them the data they wanted. And like, it was a huge add value to actually have a different way of looking at the spend.
I love it. You're treating your investors as partners and collaborators, if you will, versus I'm here to impress and do a show and a performance for you. And it takes a while to get confident enough to be vulnerable with your board, because I think there's a lot of emphasis on, I'm only going to see them. I need to come, ready to perform. Okay. So it sounds like this is an incredible opportunity for you, and this is your new path to be a CEO. So if I project forward 10 years and CoderPad goes public and, et cetera, is your next job a CEO job?
Definitely.
Okay.
I love this job. I love creating the system. I love thinking about the people. I love thinking about how to bring it all together. It's like, I don't know. I'm terrible. I use metaphors all the time, or maybe they're similes. I don't know. I told you I didn't do well in English, but it's always like making food. Like it's making a recipe, right? Like we're always making the recipe, and like I got to figure out like what ingredients I need to add, and like do I stir a few more times or stir a little bit less, and like did it come out right? And like okay, how do we need
no spice?
No spice. Add salt. Always add salt. So that's it's very fun. I love it.
Well, okay. So the thing that I was really impressed when so this is how I learned you were at Hotel Tonight. I remember the first time I went to Hotel Tonight, and a friend of mine was working at Lyric, which was a short-term rental company, and he was like, "Oh, I'm just going to find this on Hotel Tonight," and I was like, "What is this thing that you speak of?" So I go to the app. It's a dope app. It's purple, and it has like this flashing sign, and no password, no login, just a magic link. And like, I was like, the app is the lowest friction app I have used in my entire career.
Yeah.
And like that, I'm sure was insanely hard work. So, how'd you get the job? And can you talk about how product evolved over your 4.5 years there?
Sure thing. Yeah. And so shout out to Drew Birch, who did the magic link, which I think was slight plagiarism from someone else, Slack.
Slack.
But a great feature.
Great
What does it
feature.
say? Good artists copy, great artists steal.
Yes.
And then shout out to actually to Sam Shank, our founder, who and CEO, who believed passionately in the vibe. He always talked about the vibe and the brand, and whose mantra was 3 taps and a swipe. You had to be able to buy a hotel room with 3 taps and a swipe. And anything change we made, he was like, "Is it 3 taps and a swipe still?" And it was great. But you're right. It's like writing. You've got to be so deliberate and so specific. And anytime you're adding choice, you're adding a tap. Do you really need that choice? Can you default it? So I got the job because I basically begged Sam for that job for 4 months.
You did not.
I mean, like, I loved the product. I was a user before I worked there, and I loved it. And I love hotels, and I love luxurious hotels. I love them more than ever now that I have 2 kids.
Amen.
And, and I was like, I've got to find a way to like get to be part of this train ride. And then once I got in, I think it was about earning your credibility, earning your stripes. Nobody hates the head of product more than like the first head of product who shows up and is like, "I've got ideas." You don't get to have ideas until you've proven that you can actually do the work. So it was a lot of doing the work in the early days, and we over time the team grew. We had multiple apps. We actually ended up building a web product. We inventory changed. I don't know if you remember. It used to be same day only.
I remember that.
I guess in the end, we went out to 30 days. I don't even remember. It was so controversial at the time, but I can't even remember.
3 months. I think it was multiple months.
Yeah, eventually.
Oh yeah, I still use it. I still use Hotel Tonight today.
Thank you.
I'm going to Austin, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Go, Amanda, girl. This is delicious. This is delicious."
I know.
So, what did he see in you?
Sam, he saw my passion for the space. I think as a product leader, you have to love your product. You have to, you just have to, I don't think you have to be a user, but you have to love the problem. You have to love the user. And so even today at CoderPad, I love my developer friends, right? Like I've always worked closely with developers and like I feel for them and I love the product and I love their problems. And I've loved talent since I was at Snagajob. So it's like a space that I love. So I think you have to love the product. And then I think you just have to have relentless passion for your craft, right? Like always be getting better. Reading, studying, whatever that is, like given 10 minutes in the day, I'm probably going to read about a tech story, how companies are doing things, what's working, what's not, it's like 2/3 gossip, 1/3 learning. And I love that.
Well, I mean, I find it interesting. So I started my career in product marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you're a product person, but I think everyone should start in product marketing because you learn about ideal customer pricing, packaging, market sizing. But I asked our head of product at the time, "What do you think makes a great product person?" And he said, "You have to love your user, love your customer, but he also said you have to hate the product because you have to really be unhappy and want the product to get better."
Mm-hmm.
And that helps you inspire the engineers because they kind of hate the product too. So what is the relationship? What's the most effective relationship between product people and engineering people inside of a company? Like who's on first? Who's leading? What's the reporting structure? Like what do you think is that most optimal structure of that relationship?
Yeah, it's like I've been told it's like sales and marketing. So product engineering are like each other's mortal enemies until someone goes after one or the other, and then we're besties. Um, so, and I do think that's true, right? So they're peers, right? They have to be peers. One of them is about business feasibility and user need, and the other one's about technical viability and feasibility of what's possible. And I think a good product person can't come up with the best ideas. A good product person comes up with the right problems. And I think the great engineers can come up with amazing solutions.
Okay, can we slow down and go back to that? A good product person comes up with the best problems.
Yeah.
Like talk like
So Hotel Tonight, great example.
Yeah.
At Hotel Tonight, and this is a little bit of plagiarism, it was before my time, but at Hotel Tonight, one of our biggest problems was 3 taps and a swipe for you to buy a hotel room. But the reason we had the swipe was because 3 taps, we got too many calls about people being like, oh, I bought that. I'm sorry.
Right.
It's too fast. It was too easy. 3 taps was too easy. And so the requirement that went over to development was have a way for people to actually show they intended to buy the room, like create a little more fiction. And I think what we requested was have them type their initials in, right? Like AR. And the engineers got that and they were like, that's dumb. They're like, we get the problem, but that's dumb. They're like, what if we made you trace the H bed, which was our logo? And that's what they delivered.
Oh my gosh. The cult experience, right? Like,
right. And but genius, right? Like it took a great engineer who was frustrated and also recognized how dumb that solution was. But a product person to be like, the real business problem is that like, X% of our bookings are being canceled because someone's calling in and being like, I didn't mean to book.
I didn't mean to do that, right?
How do we actually show intentionality?
That is one of the most powerful reframes of that role is your job is not to have the biggest and best ideas. It's to bring the most well-crafted problem, right, to the business.
But that's the CEO job too. That's what I love about it, right?
I was just thinking like, well, so tell me about that because I was a CEO and so now I buy and build and invest in companies, which I love. My last CEO job was the biggest job I've ever had, the most interesting and probably the hardest that I have ever had. But, I've been thinking about what is the job of a CEO, different than a founder. So what do you think the job of a CEO is, and is that different from a founder in your mind?
There's like a Venn diagram. You could be a CEO and a founder, but you can also be a CEO or a founder. The two aren't codependent on each other. I think founder is a function of like just being there at the beginning, right? Like that's what a founder is. And someone who like literally takes this little kernel nugget of a little baby company and like figures out how to, whether you change the market or change the product, but one of them has to change until you have a lock. So that's what a founder does. A CEO is about putting together all the right ingredients, right? The right players on the field, the right culture, the right design, the right systems, and always looking to constantly kind of figure out and improve, and bring, prioritize the problems for the team. I don't know. I can't tell you whether or not, I can't tell you how to support Kotlin in CoderPad, but I can tell you that I get a lot of customers asking about Kotlin, so we better fucking fix that. And like, I can't tell you like how to do what the right program is for onboarding, but I can tell you that X% of our customers don't adopt these 3 features, and we really need to improve that. And I think that's the role of the CEO, is just to prioritize like, what is our biggest challenge right now? And sometimes the poor team that gets stuck with that problem, you're like, I'm now going to study you and micromanage you and be able to do this. But like, I got to learn, I need to know, I need to figure out how we're going to do this.
It's interesting. I love your perspective on it because as a CEO, I was very focused on different parts of the business at different times. So we're going to offshore engineering. I need to understand this and like, what's the workflow going to be? How are we going to organize this? Are we doing pods? Like, what's our strategy? Oh God, we're having an issue with the customer use and adoption, product people. And so you kind of helicopter in. But as I've been studying more and more CEOs, one of the things that I'm finding is this, and I love your reaction, is a founder is bringing the vision and the passion for the customer, and the CEO is bringing the ethos and is bringing
Mm.
kind of the pace at which the company's going to, all the layers that run horizontal in the business. And so I'm curious, like, do you feel like you set the pace? Do you feel like you bring the ethos? Like, do you feel like there is a fundamental change in culture now that you're the CEO?
In reverse order, definitely a change in culture.
Okay.
I'm just very different from Vincent, who is our founder. And I mean, full disclosure, Vincent is no longer at the company. So like that also makes a new culture. So definitely a different culture. Do I believe I bring the ethos? I think you have to I think unintentionally you bring the ethos, right? Um, what is the great quote? Like your worst, I think this is Netflix, your culture is defined by the worst behavior you're willing to tolerate.
Yes.
Um, you're the only one who can say no. You're the only one who can say no. I remember the first like month I was in the new CEO job at Rabbit, and I was, 34 weeks pregnant when I started that job, and I complained about health insurance. And someone looked,
Yeah.
because like, as you know, you're like, I'll use basically your other part-time job when you're pregnant is like managing health insurance. And so someone looked at me and they were like, well, if you don't like it, change it. You're the CEO. And I was like, oh, snap, you're right. It is my fault. But that's the ethos, right? Like you're the only one who can change things and tell people what to change and prioritize what to change. And so to your first question of do I set the pace? God, I'd love to ask my team that, but I neurotically do believe I set the pace. I do believe that, you've got to engage, and you got to role model the behavior you want people to have. And that means good and bad, right? Like I spend a lot of time telling people and explaining over and over to the team, like I have weird hours because I've got kids and preschool and it's COVID and like, but that
Learn
means
from home.
this morning I was slacking at 5:15 a.m. I do not expect you to slack me back at 5:15. That was when I got to it, and that's okay. So you have to like set that pace, not because you should slack at 5:15, but you have to tell people what's permissive and what's not permissive, and like
Be
how
intentional.
yeah, be intentional about how urgent things are or not. And they can't always be urgent.
I love that. And I love because I had those habits. Like I was a 4 a.m. CEO. And so I would get up and I'd be like, right, like processing through getting to inbox zero. And I remember some of the feedback I got from the team was, we feel like you're telling us that we have to do the same thing. And what you don't realize is you're kind of unintentionally setting a watermark for performance, and you're not. You actually. So I was more intentional in saying, okay, this is low priority. Just be clear. So I like the idea of just saying, I'm up at this time because I am. I'm not asking you to be.
Yeah.
So
And by
I
the
think
way, I
that's
go to
huge.
bed at 8:30 with my kids. So
Girl,
my investors will flag me at 10 o'clock at night or whatever. And I'll be like, that's not going to get a reply.
sleepy time, sleepy time. So I'm going to make a reference to something, and then I'm going to ask you a question about uncertain times. So the reference is when I got pregnant in my 40s, and so that's a dope
With
time.
my first baby. Yeah. Let's talk about this.
Because like you're a boss, like, like you've run companies, you've exited, you've raised money, and so people are listening to you. And so I'm an operating partner for a growth equity firm, and so one of the guys said, how's motherhood been? And I said, I finally understand why it's challenging for women to come back. And he was like blown away. And I said three things. First of all, it is you could literally buy a Maserati for the cost of good health care, and good health care and good child care. Like someone who sits and watches your kid versus someone who engages and does tummy time, that's a Hyundai versus a McLaren, right? Like it's really, really expensive, and we don't compensate mothers well enough in that magical period.
Yeah.
So how do you make that a benefit that they get a stipend or something during just that period, because it is insanely expensive. So that's number one. Number two, when you're coming back after having a child, for me, the last thing I want to do is prove myself again. because you're exhausted. You've got so many different issues that are happening in your life, and literally you've left the most important person in your life. They're somewhere else, and you can't be there. And so the idea of proving yourself is like an F no, like absolutely not. But that's what happens to mothers when they re-enter any role or the workforce. And then the last is, I think there's got to be more grace about the postpartum period. That there may not be depression, but there's a lot of recalibration of the emotions and who you are. And so I remember one of my employees who just come back, I saw her yelling in the hallway at someone, and I was like, unacceptable. And now I'm like, I feel you. Like, I feel you. So, are there things that you bring as a mother and as a woman leader that is informed by the child's experience?
I can't leave those three things. One, you're insanely right about the cost. It is astronomical. It's amazing how little there is to support moms, families. Two, the proving yourself rang really true. I'm going to overshare and hopefully not name names of people that end up hearing this. But when I went out on maternity leave for my first daughter, I can't, when you leave, right, a good, prepared, organized leader, company person is like, hey, I'm going to be out for 12 weeks. You do this, you do this, you do this, right. This executive is going to sit in my seat and like make these decisions. When I came back, so when I was out, the other thing was I found maternity leave to be like boring, but really busy. I got to the end of Facebook and Instagram like too many times, and I was like, what am I going to do? So I was up on work email, because you know what else you can do at 4 a.m. while you're breastfeeding? Work email. So I got the feedback of like, get off work email. Like, you are confusing the team about who's in charge because you're not here and you're replying to stuff. And I was like, okay. So I totally ducked out. And when I got back, the like kind of like sand like just fills to the space, and it had filled in around me. And I literally not only had to prove myself, I had to like throw elbows to get my space back in ways that were so uncomfortable. And just like not in my nature, but then also you're right. I had baby blues. I was super hormonal. Like, don't fuck with me right now, people. Right. So it was tough. So, I don't even remember what your question was, but like, that was just
how would you support, like, are there principles now? Are there benefits? Like, how is that informing your leadership and what you do for the families? Like,
yes, no questions asked. Maternity, paternity, for primary, secondary caregiver, great time off. 12 weeks for secondary, 16 weeks for primary. No questions asked. I don't care where you live. I don't care what you do. And it's all paid. You would not have to deal with the EDD California system, which is terrible. That was the other part-time job I had. So that actually informs it. And then I think it's also about trying to make people feel included when they get back. And included while they're away. Like, I never want to be the person who says, don't chime in. I always set the expectation of you don't need to chime in. But when you chime in, like, I want you to be heard. And then the other one I did that we had at Hotel Tonight, but I don't think we emphasized enough, is I let everybody take the time as much as they want in a year. So if you want to come back after, particularly for secondary caregivers. So right now my head of customer success is out on paternity leave. He took 3 weeks when the baby was born and then realized he was needed, but like he had an older daughter who was in preschool. And so like, his time was, he wanted to come back. But now that his second child is like 6 months old, his wife's going back. Now he needs to be present because his wife's going back to work. They're figuring that out. And now he's taking the additional, 9 weeks or whatever the math is. And like, it gives him the space to do it when he needs to do it. So I could do better. There's a lot of things. We could do an entire 7-series podcast about how to support working parents better, but I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. Okay. I know that we've got to run, but I have one last question. How did you manage your mindset during COVID? Like, lockdowns, shelter in place, like work from home, all this kind of chaos. What did you do to manage your own mindset, and how did that influence the team?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, this is where being a mom, I find is like super helpful, right? Like at some point, if you're a parent, like there will be like a diaper blowout and a kid throwing up and like, the doorbell ringing and like the dog eating the poop, like all at
Dogs
the
for
same time,
yes,
right?
yes, yes.
So when
Been
COVID
there.
happens and we're like, oh wait, the world's shutting down, we need to hunker down. Like, I got this. Drill sergeant is my jam. You get this desk, you do that, you work on this. Blah, blah, blah. So that was not a problem. But I think the mindset that kept us going was focusing on the good things that were happening. There were a lot of good things
Nice,
that ended up happening in our business and just
nice.
celebrating the good things, but then also just owning the space for people to be where they were. Like I had, we had a mom, I have a mom on my team, but she's a single mom by choice. She had a 1.5-year-old and lived in an apartment building. And this is a time where we thought you could get coronavirus from like getting in an elevator. Like she didn't leave her apartment for weeks. I was like, do what you need to do. Like,
Totally.
make
Yeah.
the space. And I think you earn a lot of credibility with people when you just meet them where they are. And there was nothing that had to happen like that day in April or May. And I think she's probably forever loyal, and the company is stronger for it because we just met people where they were, tried to stay positive, and tried to be supportive.
And you leaned in, and you really, really leaned in. So I'm going to wrap up here. First of all, congrats on being a mom, being a woman leader in this incredible time and space, and the company you're running is just beautiful. So I'm really happy that you have a great opportunity. But last question, if you have anything, like, would you say anything to a young founder right now who is, raising money, building a company, becoming a CEO? Like, what's the one piece of advice that you wish were given to you?
The one piece of advice I wish was given to me was that not everything needs to be super high growth venture backed. There is a place in the market and a place in the world for taking the time to figure out exactly what you want to build and exactly how it works and exactly what the business model is going to be. That doesn't mean you go out and raise whatever it is, a $50 million seed round or whatever they're calling it these days. Because like every time you raise money, it's the beginning of the race. It's not the end of the race. And so take the time to figure out your mechanics and your basics before you pour fuel on something that's just not ready for fuel.